I'm Jim Damani, Sheriff, Crawford County. On August 22nd, the Crawford County Sheriff's Office became aware of an incident involving two deputies that occurred in Mulberry, Arkansas. The conduct that appears on the video that is circulating is not indicative of the Crawford County Sheriff's Department or any law enforcement agency in this area. The incident being investigated is as a criminal act and has been referred to the Arkansas State Police. If any other law enforcement agency wishes to, with jurisdiction, wishes to investigate, they will have our complete cooperation. This matter is also being handled and investigated as an internal investigation for any policy or any other violations that may have occurred. The investigation will be taken and is being taken seriously, very seriously. The office recognizes the activity portrayed in the video, and we condemn all violence against any civilian or any person being detained by the sheriff's office. It is not. I cannot comment much more on this investigation as it is still an open investigation. I promise that I hold, and I give my word that I hold all my employees accountable for their actions, and I will take appropriate action, whatever that action is, when these investigations are complete.
You released the identities of the officers involved, the two deputies and the Mulberry police officer.
Yes.
What can you tell us about those? Are they veteran deputies or?
Yes. So they are. One officer worked. Both officers. Let's see. Hold on a second. Let me start over. Okay. Yes, the officers. None of them are rookies. They've been in law enforcement for some time. The Mulberry officer has been an officer for many years. He worked here in the early part of 2000. Was left to go to Oklahoma and then came back as a Mulberry officer. The officer, my other deputy that works here, was he's come out of. He worked in a jail. He's probably been here and been an officer for 3 to 4 years or so. And the third officer has been an officer probably 5, 6 years or so. He worked in another agency before he came here.
And did you say that one person? You said somebody was receiving death threats lately.
Yeah, there's a person that lives in the county. He's got the same name as one of the officers. He's not related to the sheriff's office. He's not an officer. He has no contacts to us at all. He unfortunately has the same name as one of the officers.
That person has received death threats over this?
He's received threats against him and his family, yes.
Are they suspended with pay pending this investigation?
Yes, that is protocol. As you know, throughout the country is protocol to suspend them with pay on administrative leave until we can do an investigation.
And you've had a chance to, or is there dash cam or officer body camera video available of this incident?
There is a dash cam. Mulberry Police Department officers have a dash cam. We do not. The Crawford County Sheriff's Office does not have that. We have reviewed that, and that is been sent to the state police for their investigation. And we have the video, of course, from the concerned citizen.
The dash cam is only coming from the Mulberry police officer?
That's the only one that had it.
And no body cameras for any of the officers?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Have there been previous disciplinary action against any of these deputies or officer, or any allegations of excessive force in their past?
I'd have to check on that. I don't know. I don't know at this time.
What is the excessive force policy for Crawford County?
Well, it's kind of lengthy, but whatever force is necessary to gain control of a person who is violently attacking you or resisting arrest is kind of how it reads. I don't know word for word how it reads, but it's kind of.
You're in that dash cam because we haven't seen that. We've only seen this video that was posted on social media.
Yeah.
Does that change your initial thoughts or anything?
Again, I have to look at everything again. It does put a little more light on the subject because the dash cam does bring to light other things that did happen there, that initiated, that wasn't caught on the citizens' camera. So there is some other things on there.
How often does the the sheriff's office do excessive force training? When's the last time your officers went through excessive force training?
Oh gosh, you're asking me hard questions. I'm not sure the last time I know they do get it in the academy. As far as our training here, I can't tell you the last time that we do it. They do take courses on duty to intervene is one class that they take every year, and I know those officers have taken that. So the actual use of force, I think in the academy, I'm going to say the academy is probably the last time.
When you mentioned that they're veteran officers, so the academy would have been a while ago for them?
Several years ago, yeah.
Does it concern you that seeing that video and knowing that those veterans have been out on the streets without maybe someone reporting them previously?
Everything concerns me about this case, so yeah,
What concerns you?
everything about it. And I'm looking into it. And again, when I get all the facts and I look at the videos again, and I'm sitting down with my admin, give my word to everybody that I will take appropriate action, whatever is necessary for what happened here yesterday.
Especially over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of scrutiny over law enforcement agencies across the country. What does this mean to your department, having people see that video and you saying that that doesn't represent your department as a whole?
Well, you've got bad apples in everywhere, so it's kind of hard to answer. We've got bad apples in every profession in this country, everywhere, every job, and sometimes those people do slip by, and it does take time to weed them out, unfortunately. But they will be punished for what they did if they are found to be in violation of any rights, laws, or anything like that.
In your opinion, is there any question whether or not that was excessive force that we saw?
I'd rather not give my opinion right now until the state police does their investigation and they come up with a decision.
Why no body cameras? You're one of the few agencies that doesn't have any. Is that something that you think will change soon?
I hope so. I've been looking into it and researching to get body cams and dash cams, and I hope to be able to accomplish that in the near future.
Without this person posting this video on social media, would you have known about this incident?
Probably not. Probably not.
What does this do to morale in the department?
Well, of course, it hurts morale. Nobody condones this type of activity or this kind of violence. So it's very hard on the whole department because we are looked at as a whole and not just individuals. And so it's the whole family. It looks bad, and morale does take a dive when these things like this happen. And like I said, it's not what we stand for. I said that, and that's what I stand on. So yes, as a whole department, it's not a good thing, and morale does go down.
Was this suspect known to police? Was he known to your deputies?
No, he's not from here. He's from the East Coast, I believe, one of the Carolinas. Over there.
And just for clarification, he initially had a knife, but not at the time at that arrest. That video shows. Can you clarify that?
He initially, the officer asked him if he had any weapons on him, and he said he did. And I believe he at one point handed it over to the officer. And then when it appears when they were about to take him into custody because of part of their investigation on the scene, that's when he became violent.
He became violent. Did the officers do a report on what they said happened?
Yes.
Can you tell us any more about that?
It's basically what I've told you already. It's not much
Does
more
it
than
match
that.
what we see in the video?
Yes, it does. Yeah. But again, I'm not had a lot of time to really critique everything. So I need time to do that kind of stuff.
Did the officers admit that the deputies admit that there was a struggle? And
Yes.
that they beat this man or they kneed him in the head?
They admitted that they had to use force to subdue him. Yes.
Can you tell us if they were provoked or if he was running away at the time?
When I believe what it shows is when they were going to take him into custody is when he started to fight, became violent with them.
Did you say that, we know as Arkansas State Police, did you say the FBI is also investigating?
Yes, the FBI and I believe the Department of Justice might be involved for a civil rights violation.
Your office?
The FBI will be here today with state police to do their investigation.
What's your message to the public about the deputies as a whole, your entire department now?
This is- Like I said earlier, this is not indicative of any law enforcement in this area, and I hold my people accountable. And I will take, I give my word, I will take appropriate actions, whatever they are, whatever the outcome of the investigation is, I will do the appropriate thing and take those actions.
Chief, can you speak to the mug shot that we saw of the suspect? He had his hood up, and some were questioning on social media if that was done to disguise some of his injuries. Is that standard to, if someone's wearing a hoodie to keep their hood up?
I don't know, but no, it's not to hide anything. I'm not trying to hide anything. We will not hide anything. We'll be very transparent about everything. As I said, we'll cooperate with any agency that wants to investigate this or wishes to investigate it. We're not trying to hide anything.
How long have you been a sheriff, and have you dealt with something to this magnitude in the past?
I've been the sheriff since last September of August, the end of August last year. And
Anything like this?
yes, it's been, yeah, I have similar type things. Mhm.
You said the officers were trying to subdue the subject. Can you comment on why we see in that video that the officers were striking the subject in the head? I don't know how that necessarily goes to subduing someone that's on the ground.
Well, I can't answer for their state of mind like right now, like I said, but I'm investigating all that, and that's what we're looking into. What force they used and how much force they used. And again, I will take appropriate action when this is over and the state police does their investigation and they. And at that time, I will have more answers, and you're welcome to come back, and we will go over some more things.
Will we be
Okay?
able to see that dash cam video?
That you're gonna have to ask state police on that because they're in control of that right now. Okay? Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.